There's a video going around claiming Tyler Henry has finally revealed the most evil person he has ever read for. A disturbing session from 2017 he allegedly kept quiet about for years. Sounds like a massive story. But before accepting the headline at face value, it is worth slowing down and looking at what is actually confirmed, what remains pure speculation, and what nobody genuinely knows yet. Because the real story here, the one built on documented facts rather than viral framing, might actually be more interesting and more revealing than the claim driving all the attention right now. Who is Tyler Henry? For anyone unfamiliar, Tyler Henry is the medium behind Hollywood Medium, Life After Death with Tyler Henry, and Live from the Other Side on Netflix. Born in Hanford, California in 1996, he says he first became aware of his abilities at age 10 through a premonition connected to his grandmother's death. That experience was specific enough and accurate enough in his telling that it completely reframed how he understood his own perception and set the direction for everything that followed in his personal and professional life. By high school, he was charging $40 per session, reading classmates and teachers, and teaching grief processing classes at a local metaphysical shop before he had even graduated. He landed his first television show, Hollywood Medium, on E! At 19, making him one of the youngest people to anchor a reality series built entirely around claimed paranormal abilities. The show ran for multiple seasons and introduced him to audiences far beyond the spiritualist communities where mediums typically find their following. Since then, his client list has grown to include some of the most recognizable names across multiple industries and generations. The Kardashians, Megan Fox, Snooki, Jodie Sweetin, Lil' Kim, Margaret Cho, Rob Dyrdek, Ricky Lake, Boy George, Matt Lauer, Alan Thicke, Kristen Chenoweth, Steve-O, and many others. His transition to Netflix expanded his reach to international audiences and allowed for a production format that could handle more emotionally complex material than his show had accommodated. By 2024, his waiting list had reportedly reached 700,000 people, a figure that speaks either to extraordinary demand for what he offers or to extraordinarily effective marketing, depending entirely on where a given person stands on the question of whether his abilities are genuine. Henry has also been notably candid across years of interviews about the personal costs of his claimed gift. He has spoken about growing up in a conservative Central California Christian community where some people viewed his abilities as a genuine spiritual blessing and others viewed them as something far more theologically troubling or even dangerous. He has talked about the social isolation that came with being visibly and identifiably different from peers during adolescence, a period when difference tends to carry a real and lasting social cost. He has spoken about the emotional and physical drain of sustained reading work and about how difficult it is to maintain boundaries between his own emotional state and the grief he absorbs from the people he reads for. He has said that if he tries to take a complete break from sessions, he begins feeling physically uncomfortable within approximately 2 weeks, describing his ability less as a skill he deploys and more as a constant perceptual condition he manages every single day. That is the established and documented public picture of who Tyler Henry is before the current viral claim entered the conversation and began generating the kind of attention that tends to run ahead of the underlying facts. What the video claims and what it leaves out. The video circulating right now says Henry conducted a deeply unsettling reading in 2017 with someone he has allegedly described as the most evil person he has ever sat across from in a professional context. The framing suggests he deliberately kept this quiet for years and is only now opening up about it in ways that imply something significant is finally being revealed. Here is the critical detail the dramatic headline omits entirely. That video is currently the only source for this claim in any form. There is no name attached to the alleged client. No second outlet has independently reported the same story or added any corroborating detail. No verified quote from Henry using that specific language has been located in any interview, social media post, podcast appearance, or on-camera statement from any period. No documentation exists of when or where he allegedly made these statements, or to what audience or in what context. That does not make the claim automatically false. Something can be true and unverified simultaneously. But it does mean treating it as established fact is not justified by what currently exists as evidence. This specific framing is also extremely common in celebrity content across social media platforms. A dramatic title gets attached to a thin or ambiguous underlying premise. The content gets shared and reshared across channels and platforms. Each repetition adds a layer of apparent legitimacy through sheer familiarity, so that by the time most people encounter the claim, it has the texture of established fact, even though the original single source has never been supplemented or independently verified. That is not a judgment about anyone curious enough to click on the story. It is simply a description of a documented pattern in how viral celebrity claims spread across the internet. And it is exactly why slowing down before repeating unverified claims as confirmed facts is always worth the effort regardless of how compelling the framing is. The difficult sessions actually on the record. Henry has talked about uncomfortable readings before in documented and source contexts, just not in the most evil person framing that the current claim is built around. His session with Boy George is the most thoroughly documented example of real and visible on-camera friction. Boy George arrived openly skeptical and reportedly needed active convincing from his manager Paul Kemsley just to show up at all. Things grew tense enough during the reading that Kemsley, who had been watching from a separate room, entered mid-session to encourage his client to approach the process with more openness. That tension was visible on camera and was not edited away from the broadcast. By the end of the session, Boy George told cameras he believed Henry had a genuine gift and would be open to another reading in the future. That is real sourced friction from a documented session. But the arc it follows is skepticism gradually giving way to openness, not anyone being characterized as uniquely evil or morally disturbing or sinister in any meaningful sense. His 2016 reading with Today show anchor Matt Lauer became uncomfortable in a structurally different way that is worth understanding separately. Henry gave Lauer a personal and emotionally significant reading touching on family losses, including the deaths of his father and grandfather. The reading was received warmly at the time of broadcast. The context around it changed dramatically the following year when Lauer was fired from NBC News following a misconduct complaint from a colleague, a termination that opened the door to further allegations from multiple women about his conduct across an extended period. Fans revisited the reading in light of those revelations and widely noted that Henry had not perceived anything during the session that suggested what would later become public knowledge. That is not a story about Henry sensing something genuinely dark during the session and choosing to stay quiet about it. It is a reading that looked completely different once outside information arrived and permanently changed the context surrounding it. Both situations involve the word uncomfortable being applied to a Tyler Henry session, but they are structurally distinct in ways that matter significantly for evaluating what the 2017 claim is actually asserting and whether it fits any established pattern. The fraud accusations already surrounding his career. No serious and thorough discussion of Tyler Henry is complete without engaging the substantial and well-documented body of criticism that has been directed at him and at the broader practice of mediumship across his entire career. The most fundamental accusation leveled at Henry by critics is that he employs cold reading, a technique documented extensively in psychological and skeptical literature that involves making high-probability statements, reading physical and behavioral cues from subjects, allowing subjects to fill in specifics themselves, and presenting the resulting exchange as evidence of paranormal perception. Critics argue that virtually every Henry reading they have examined follows this structural pattern without deviation. The more serious accusation involves what is referred to as hot reading, the possibility that Henry or members of his production team research subjects in advance, given that his clients are almost always publicly documented famous people whose family histories, losses, and personal circumstances are often findable through basic internet searches. His 2016 reading with a Today Show producer is frequently cited in this context. Henry referenced a cardiac death and another family loss during that session. The producer confirmed his father had died of a heart attack and his brother had died of a drug overdose. Critics pointed out that both facts were locatable online with minimal effort. Henry's executive producer has stated on record that production deliberately restricts which crew members know a guest's identity before sessions begin, specifically to address this concern. Scientific skepticism activist Susan Jerbick published a formal written critique through the Center for Inquiry, specifically targeting Henry's reading with the late actor Alan Thicke. During that session, Henry referenced heart and blood pressure issues running in Thicke's family. Thicke died of an aortic dissection months later. Jerbick's critique argued that flagging cardiovascular concerns for a middle-aged American man is statistically safe rather than genuinely predictive, given that heart disease is the leading cause of death for American men, making the reference a high-probability statement rather than a specific genuine prediction. A 2024 opinion piece in the Skeptical Inquirer argued that the format of Live from the Other Side paradoxically undermines rather than supports confidence in reliability because it removes the controlled conditions that would be necessary to evaluate whether readings are genuinely accurate. Henry himself has said he aims for approximately 80% accuracy, explicitly acknowledging he is wrong a meaningful portion of the time, and welcomes genuine skepticism while distinguishing it from what he calls closed-minded cynicism. His documented hits and misses. Rob Dyrdek and his wife were convinced they were expecting a daughter. Henry told him directly he would become a father figure to a little boy. The child was a boy. Margaret Cho received a prediction about a book succeeding commercially with a specific 2-month delay from its originally planned publication date. She confirmed both details. Kristen Chenoweth had a reading where Henry reportedly sketched a specific piece of jewelry before the session began before meeting her or being told who he was about to read. Her family confirmed it matched an actual piece belonging to a deceased loved one. On the other side, his reading with Lil' Kim referenced suspicions Notorious B.I.G. had harbored about threats to his life, details critics noted had been publicly discussed for years in reporting and documentary coverage before the reading took place. His 2016 comments about Donald Trump's presidential chances were vague enough that multiple outlets noted at the time they could be interpreted as consistent with either possible election outcome, exactly what critics identify as unfalsifiable rather than genuinely predictive. How his stated approach to client discretion is relevant here. One documented and on-record element of how Henry describes his professional practice has direct bearing on the current claim, even if it does not confirm or deny it specifically. He has said in multiple interviews that when reading someone with a significant public profile, he is deliberately careful about what he discusses publicly afterward, because the subject has a public image and private concerns he considers himself professionally obligated to respect. He has said explicitly that he tailors his public discussion of specific sessions based on what individual clients have indicated they want kept private. This is a documented professional position that explains in general terms why he might be reticent about characterizing any specific session or client in unflattering detail. It is not confirmed that any specific session involves something disturbing enough to warrant years of deliberate concealment. But it does establish that his general discretion about client details is a long-stated professional value documented across years of public communication rather than a behavior specific to any one allegedly dark and secret session. What is genuinely missing and where this story actually lands? There is no verified quote from Henry using the words "most evil person anywhere" in any sourced and verifiable context. No confirmed identity for the alleged client. No second independent source reporting the same information. No documentation of when or where the alleged statements were made. Henry has a long and detailed public record of discussing difficult sessions and challenging clients in general terms without ever characterizing any individual as uniquely evil in any verifiable context across nearly a decade of public life. The current claim does not match that established pattern of communication. That does not make it impossible, but the evidence required to treat it as confirmed simply does not currently exist.